Frontline is a presentation of the Documentary Consortium.
I'm going to tear apart the establishment. I'm going to tear everything apart. This is Pat Buchanan riding around on a bus in Georgia is a threat to that establishment. You know why we are? Because we're telling the truth.
Tonight, President Bush and Pat Buchanan await the truth of today's primaries. But tomorrow, they'll be joined by another Republican challenger.
First comment is that if George Bush was surprised by the results in New Hampshire, I think he'll be shocked by the results in Texas and the southern states.
Beginning on Saturday in South Carolina and next week on Super Tuesday, the most controversial Republican of all joins the chase.
Appreciate y'all coming out. I love you. I love you.
Tonight on Frontline.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've made mistakes in my life. I've never called them youthful indiscretions, by the way. I've made mistakes.
Does David Duke still hold the racist beliefs of his youth? Or has he changed?
I asked David Duke if he had changed. His immediate response to that was, I haven't changed. He said, the same things that drove me as a 17-year-old or a 25-year-old are the same things that drive me today.
Who is David Duke?
With funding provided by the financial support of viewers like you and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is Frontline.
I'm thankful for people's decent, good Christian attitude toward me, and I think that people can change their lives, and I have.
David Duke will not become the 1992 Republican nominee for president. But in this campaign, that's only where the questions start.
Appreciate you. All right.
No matter the travels through the primary states, David Duke is drawing full houses. Some hate him. To others, he's a hero. Always, they're curious.
I just think that it's good to have an open mind to listen to David Duke and see what he has to say first before everybody starts things.
I like to hear what he has to say. I don't know too much about his past. Once you're in the KKK, I think it's kind of hard to lose your views.
And a lot of people don't know what he stands for because you can't decide until you hear.
A crowd like these South Carolina college students is fresh soil for Duke. Young voters come to see the mystery man up close, Nazi sympathizer who claims he can now speak for mainstream America.
In my life, I've never been concerned about what's popular or unpopular. I've always been concerned about saying what I think is right and fighting against what I think is wrong.
The campaign speech is classic conservative Republican, against big affirmative action.
Because human rights must be allowed to be protected for all human beings, no matter what their race.
Duke speaks to his future, but his past is also in the room. Among the students sits a leader of the local Ku Klux Klan.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am not ashamed of my heritage. I don't hate other races or other traditions or other values. And it primarily comes from European values.
So has the messenger changed, or only the message? Is this a new David Duke, or simply the sum of ones who have come before?
All our tax money is really doing today, it's not really alleviating poverty. It's making more poverty. It's making more welfare cases. It's making more black pickaninnies every day. What has the liberal social welfare system accomplished over the last 30 years in this country?
I say it's time that our white taxpayers' money goes to build a better country instead of breeding more blacks.
You're seeing the greatest nation on earth pass away. The barbarians are at the gates. We're going to keep on going and keep on fighting, every one of us, until we achieve victory for our Klan movement and we assure the future of our race in this universe. White power. And let's go to victory this year. Thank you. Thank you.
David Duke is a man with a smooth public message and a deeply troubling past. He asks that we concentrate on the message and ignore the past. ask us to believe that he has left a part of himself behind. But has he? Is what you now see of David Duke what you would really get? That's the question now confronting Republican voters in primaries from Mississippi to Massachusetts, as Duke steps out of Louisiana politics and into the national arena cast. But tonight, we'll look for answers by exploring the patterns of his life, from early childhood to only yesterday. The lawns are neat and the streets shady. Comes from, and where he has stayed, the white suburbs of New Orleans. These are neighborhoods where loyalty to God and country are important. And for many, loyalty to the hometown boy. The voters of Metairie and Jefferson Parish gave Duke his first political victory, electing him to...
I think he's American as Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson.
Personally, I like the fact that he's not afraid to speak out his beliefs.
A lot of what he's talking about makes sense, and that's a lot of what the people out here in Jefferson Parish particularly espouse to. And it's the good old common American values.
Jefferson Parish is the wealthiest in Louisiana. On average, it's not far from the American Legion Hall to the White. Born in 1950 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he was 4 when the family settled here. They moved from Holland, where Duke's father, an engineer, strange homecoming for David and his sister, Dottie.
It was a difficult adjustment to move from Europe to New Orleans. It was a tight-knit community, and I think having been in Europe, our accents had sort of taken on a different flavor than the Southern. And in school, it was, we were different. It was different. I think it must have been different for my brother also. He was quite young.
Something else changed that first year in New Orleans. On David's 5th birthday, Mrs. Duke's sister was killed in a plane crash.
And so my mother, at that point, in her grief, I believe, turned to alcohol to sort of hide from the pain of all the things that she'd had to go through. It went downhill. It was just great sadness, a family just torn apart by alcohol. The only person that I ever had, and my brother ever had, to nurture us was, and Pinky was us at the table. Mother, I mean, they loved her. We all loved her. She was part of our family, so she sat at our table and ate with us.
His family were never anti-Semitic, were never anti-black. There was never a word of it mentioned.
Author Michael Zatterin is David Duke's biographer.
His father was a very strict disciplinarian. A man who was in the Army stayed in reserves for years afterwards. A loving father, but a very, very, very strict father. Every morning or every afternoon, the kids since age 3 had to sit down for 3 hours and read without getting up.
No matter what time of year, even in the summertime, he would give us at least 3 hours of homework a day, and he would make it up. And or we'd have a book and have to do a book report on it. And I sort of rebelled. My brother, he just shone. He loved to read, and it was just what he wanted to do.
David loved science and loved to read and do experiments. And he took over his parents' garage, and he had white rats and white mice and cages on top of cages on top of cages.
Oh, yes, I remember my mother complaining that the garage was in cages, and somehow they just kept reproducing.
Well, he had white rats and white mice. Well, one of the rats was impregnated by a wild rat. And, you know, he said, as a kid, you don't think, well, the little babies were born, and, well, rather than have the regular features of a white rat, they had darker hair and were just different. They ran around differently and had different characteristics, which he found to be fascinating, that there was differences genetically. This was about age 13.
And that had a profound impression.
He realized that there were differences between animals, and if animals were different, then people would be different.
When David was in the 8th grade, he was given a school assignment about race.
Clifton L. Gaines Christian School asked the kids to do a report on segregation, the pros and cons, write both sides. Most kids would have gone, scribbled, your two-page report and handed it in. But he went to the library, found volumes of stuff on why integration is positive. Could find nothing that said segregation is good, integration is bad. He went from library to library. Someone suggested that he go down to the Citizens Council, which was a segregation group led by Judge Perez years ago. They had a library of materials that biologically gave statistics on why you should never mix races.
I went down, took the streetcar down to the headquarters of the Citizens Council, and I walked into their office, and I was really amazed because they had a whole shelf, a whole wall practically of books by scientists, educators, psychologists, doctors, lawyers, anthropologists, you name it. Educated, learned people on the integration question and arguing in a reasonable and rational way to violence. And I finally read a book called Race and Reason, and I started slowly coming to believe that racial differences, intrinsic racial differences.
And his teacher said that a kid who had never said anything other than being a nice little quiet, David Duke, got up and read his report and blasted Jews and blacks. And he said that it just was not like him, that was a turning point.
And soon, only David was left at home with his mother. When he was 16, his father went to Vietnam. It was during this time that Duke liked to go off by himself and take long, solitary swims.
His sister eloped, couldn't stand living at home, just left home. His mother was in a bed with the lights off. His father left, and he's basically by himself. He was alone. Over the next couple of years, he began reading a lot.
One of his favorite books, White Power, by George Lincoln Rockwell, head of the American Nazi Party.
By the time he was a senior in high school, he had a Nazi flag in his house, in his bedroom, and he and some friends joined the Ku Klux Klan. And theirs was not so much anti-black, but anti-Jewish.
And it was at this time that I had this little encounter with him. He was assigned to me to take spelling tests.
Leola Williams was a social studies teacher at John F. Kennedy Senior High School.
I had arranged my chairs. I didn't want anyone to move them. He did. When I turned my back and went toward the front, he moved the chair again. So I went back there and I told him, I said, now I spoke to you very kindly, and I asked you not to move my chair. Now, don't do it again. And at this particular moment, he said, you don't know to whom you're speaking. And he proceeded to take his wallet out of his... He had a picture of Hitler, which covered the left side, and on the right side was a picture of the swastika. And I'll put my boys on you. And I said, and I will put my boys on you. And I walked on to the front. He had put the chair back, had his pencil ready, and I proceeded to give my test.
Duke arrived as a freshman at Louisiana State University in the late 60s, in the midst of heated debate over the Vietnam War. It was a campus filled with strong opinion, but to his fellow students, Duke was something new.
Now, the class where you met him, was a German language class?
It was a German introduction to German class.
Fred Hawley remembers a day the teacher put a question.
And he asked a number of people why they took the class, and he asked David. And David says, well, so I can read something very close to that. I think that's exactly what he said. I was sitting right next to him, like this far away. And the teacher just had this big kind of moon face, and very friendly, gentle man. And he comes and he bends over, he says, well, Schopenhauer, Kant, or, Hegel, and Marx. And David says, no, Adolf Hitler. And the whole class just kind of, turns around and starts shooting daggers at us. I had a feeling this is where he was going with this. And I'm kind of moving over in my chair, and the guy who was sitting next to me got very agitated, kind of a moment frozen in time.
He emerged as a leader of the Nazi Party, and I was a leader of a conservative political group, and we ended up for the first time clashing right here in WJBO radio on a debate.
Mike Connolly was campus president of the Young Americans for Freedom. He remembers that the debate focused on the Jews.
Oh, yeah, he said they controlled everything. They controlled the banks, they controlled the major financial institutions, the stock markets, they controlled all of the big businesses, they controlled the media. He was very big on saying that Jews control all the media. And, of course, he said they controlled the blacks, too, that the blacks were just puppets of the Jews. And it was a very hate-filled.
His sophomore year, he came back, and there was something called Free Speech Alley, which for those, it was a chance they had on my Wednesday afternoons, a soapbox. You can get up there and talk about the high price of tickets, or you were mad about Nixon, the war, or whatever. Duke got up there the first day, the first week they got back in school, and started saying the problem is Jews and blacks, and that's the whole problem in the world. And he began screaming about Jews, not talking, screaming. So every week he began going, at which the local newspaper, the Reveille, had him front page every week. So he had found a vehicle, his first vehicle, to expound his views, which was so far out.
What was the reaction of the students to him?
Well, they thought he was a joke, Jolly, and hassled David Duke. And David Duke loved it. He thrived on the antagonism that was thrown towards him. I didn't think he was such a joke. I knew some of the people he had out in the Baton Rouge community who were supplying him with money, and I would sit there and listen to David Duke talk about having read Mein Kampf 10 times and predicting back then that someday he would have to moderate his rhetoric and become mainstream, but he would be elected to high office. I can remember him specifically saying he thought he would probably be governor of Louisiana by the time he was in his 40s, and he would then be in a position of power that when the inevitable race war occurred, because he was convinced there was going to be a race war, that he would be in the position to lead the whites, to lead the Aryan race to victory in that race war. And the man was absolutely convinced of his own destiny, and that sort of frightened me even back in those days.
In 1970, these pictures frightened many people. Duke put on the Nazi uniform to picket attorney William Kunstler, appearing at Tulane University. The photos have followed Duke ever since.
I've never been a member of any Nazi organization in the United States.
Well, but
that's political theater. That's simply using a demonstration to call attention to an incident. Kunstler was coming to this university. There was not much attention of it in the community. I felt it should be what he was doing. So I acted in that regard because I saw nobody else doing it.
Well, yeah, all right, but I still
That does not make me a Nazi.
But while he was at LSU, Duke was campus leader of a group called the White Student Alliance, an arm of the Nazi National Socialist White People's Party.
And that's when his father said, no more Nazi activities, of which he, so he wrote a letter to the National Socialist Liberation Front, disallowing himself publicly. However, he kept the same friends, same organizations. He kept doing the same thing. He didn't change.
In fact, he formed a new group. The White Youth Alliance used a Klan symbol, the cross wheel, but it was identified by the FBI as another Nazi youth organization. Duke ran the Youth Alliance with the support of Babs Wilson, a well-known Baton Rouge. In 1971, he went to Laos, where his father was working for the U.S. government.
David, while he was in Laos, was employed by the Agency for International Development as an English language teacher to the Lao Army. That's as far as it goes.
Bill Gibson was visiting his own father in Laos that summer, a time when Air America was flying supplies to Laotian troops.
He's trying to make it out like he was some type of war hero, and that's just not true. He was a young man who just wanted to have a good time.
I was in Laos during the Vietnam War. I instructed anti-communist Laotian army officers. I've seen totalitarianism firsthand. I've seen lines of 5,000 people with every possession they own on their heads and their backs fleeing from communism.
How long were you over there?
About 9 months.
Okay.
Typical tour.
Okay, let's go back again to the night.
This idea of him risking his life and running around Laos fighting communists is just not true. If you wanted to take a ride on an airplane, if you knew the pilot, you'd say, hey, can I go with you one time? And you could go on a rice drop or just about anywhere. The strangest thing, David would talk about his organization. And I don't know why it never dawned on me not to say, what is your organization? I know I never would have thought it was a Ku Klux Klan. It just would have never crossed my mind.
The American white people are searching and are reaching out for a movement, and the Ku Klux Klan is that movement. White power! White power! White power!
Soon after he returned home, at only 23, Duke was elected Louisiana.
In hoc signo vinces. In this sign, we shall conquer. There is no more truly representative symbol of the white race than the fiery cross. It is our symbol.
Duke married Chloe Hardin, his college girl. They worked together, organizing Klan activities.
Bring the robes.
What about banners for decorations?
Bring all the banners. Bring the old-style banners with you.
They named their first child Erica Lindsay, after Jim Lindsay, the national leader of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
Our political activities and social functions and things like this, the Erica.
Chloe and David Duke had ambitions for their Klan. They saw it as the vehicle for
a small beginning.
Where do you hope to go?
Well, we hope to eventually become the people that are running the government of the country.
White power!
Duke rose to the national leadership in 1975, becoming the Knights' Grand Wizard. He observed Klan traditions, but he was moving beyond them, shedding the robes for a business suit.
The time has come for this to stop. Now!
His first was unsuccessful, but it brought him national attention.
You're not going to deny murder, are you?
The Klan. In the South, white people were being hurt, killed. Listen, this is what the case was. Now, there were some lynchings in the South, but there were many lynchings in the American Revolution. But I'm not going to.
He became a TV celebrity. He used to go speak at colleges across the country. You know, TV stations, radio stations had him on. He was somebody. He had found a niche that made him somebody.
The reason why that so many blacks are not working in the black community is not because the jobs aren't there. It's because they don't want to work, or they don't want to do a mean. They all.
Junior Klansman, and you don't represent the big boys.
No, I do represent.
Like they're burning crosses. They be look. See, you're a hippie Klansman. You've been wearing Jesse Jackson.
People watching the television, they might think this is not true, or he's not telling the
Here
truth.
came a TV show, and I was sitting at the edge of the bed, and this fella appeared in a three-piece suit, very articulate, handsome. His name was David Duke. That's where I first actually got involved in contacting the Ku Klux Klan.
Tom Martinez was Duke's Philadelphia organizer. He appears in shadow because he later became an FBI informant.
He was talking the same issues he's talking in 1992 against forced busing of issues. He wasn't talking about burning crosses and killing people. And here's a guy who was out of work making peanuts for a living, and I was just interested in, as the Crusader, it was written and put together very well. When people are eating out of garbage cans and people are unemployed, the times are ripe, they'll listen to anybody. You know, David Duke's a person who will never pick up a gun and shoot anybody or burn anybody's synagogue, but David Duke will entice others by his writings and the way he fires people up.
That publication is a very sick, I'll admit it, that publication reflects our principles, our ideas, the way we see the world.
One frequent theme in The Crusader, complaints about Jews in positions of power, controlling major institutions.
These people that have thrown manure on our civilization and our culture, are trying to turn our people away from our own blood and our own heritage, while they themselves have been the biggest racists on earth. Yes, I would say that there was a hatred for them.
As we found out these things, that he was in the Klan, we were all very upset about it. And in fact, my brother, no one would want to be in the same room with us because we would end up screaming at each other. It was horrible. It really was. So I just really stopped communicating with him, except for when I had to about my mother or something.
In The Crusader, Duke ran ads for his mail-order book business. The list of selections also reflected a special interest.
Mein Kampf, Hitler was my friend.
No, wait a second.
Hitler. The Hitler we loved and why?
We sell a long book list, and you're picking out a few of them.
Okay,
and
I can read the others.
We do believe that there should be a You see, this interview is exactly what I was talking about before. It's a totally negative thing. You're just trying to get me to respond to all these different things.
Well, I am.
And that's all it is. I mean, it's nothing about what we're doing, our philosophy, our ideals.
That's exactly what it's
No,
about.
it's not either, because you're picking out something from a long time ago. You're picking out a few books that we sell, and you're distorting it, and you're going to make the people out there think that we're Nazis, and we're not. And you know damn well we're not. The blood that flows in our veins speaks to us and tells us of the eternal saga of the Aryan race.
In 1978, Duke organized a national conference of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. The participants attempted murder.
Damn the rats and vermin at our feet. Let us give them the hell they deserve. White victory.
White power! White power!
The meeting in New Orleans was taped by a local video crew hired by independent producer Lionel Price.
They had workshops, had classroom activities. We were not allowed in the classrooms, but we did find out some of the subject matter that they were teaching in those classrooms. In addition,
such as?
Well, the one that really sticks out in my mind is what they call COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program. Counterintelligence program was sleight of hand, deception, how to deceive, how to make people think you're doing. An example of that would be David's book, and admittedly, he told us that was...
African Atom Mohammed X was an attack manual aimed at a militant black market.
It's just a matter of intelligence. Essentially did was get us the names of the most radical blacks in the United States, so that when the time comes, we will know where they are, those who hate white people.
As Grand Wizard, Duke outside Louisiana. A speaking tour to England earned him headlines and a BBC interview.
Is it the case that you want to see a policy, or you would like to see a policy in Britain of, if necessary, enforced repatriation of non-white people?
I'm in favor of a repatriation program. I think it should begin on a voluntary basis.
And then what happens if the people don't want to go?
Well, I think that eventually, the British people should have a right to make their country white.
We're not going to be making...
More and more, Duke was sparking controversy even inside the Klan. There were reports of internal division. A rival Klansman accused Duke of trying to make money by selling the mailing list. In 1979, after 6 years of leadership, Duke resigned from the Klan.
And I'd like to make sure people know what I'm using under the sheets. I have to leave that title to Bill Clinton from Arkansas. There was never any allegation that anybody in the organization that I headed, and there are different clans, and that's no excuse because I don't excuse my Klan membership, but my organization was never accused of any violent behavior. And I was in that organization about 4 or 5 years. I kept trying to get the issues out that I believe in. I was banging my head up against the wall, and I resigned after about 4 years, and I've been out of the Klan ever since, and that's been about 12 years since I left the organization. Next question.
He left the Klan and formed the National Association for the Advancement of White People in Ritual.
Tim, this is Lance.
Lance Hill of the Louisiana Court has been tracking Duke's career for several years.
The NAAWP, National Association for the Advancement of White People, as if white people have not advanced. It's an organization Duke formed in 1980. It's supposed to be a grassroots organization with a membership, and it publishes the periodical, the NAAWP News.
The newsletter was a direct descendant of the Klan's Crusader. So was the membership.
Let me tell you who...
Longtime Duke supporters like Babs Wilson followed him to the new group.
Well, before we get into that, I'd just like to say this to you, Mr. Donahue. You are a very handsome white man. Honored to be here.
And the reason...
From a leader of the Klan to the NAAWP, Babs Wilson remained one of Duke's most active backers.
I consider him to be one of the most courageous people that I've ever known, because many politicians bow into the so-called group pressure, and a lot of it comes from the news media. In other words, if you don't have politically correct ideas and beliefs and thoughts, then you are to be shunned or scorned or ridiculed or maligned. And David always speaks what he believes to be true.
In her home, the place of honor belongs to Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest, the reputed founder of the Klan. Right nearby, the founder of the NAAWP. In In 1983, a letter from Duke appeared in the NAAWP News. It discussed repatriation of Duke wrote, "Is it a radical solution? Yes. But who can deny that cancer-ridden America can be saved by anything short?"
I'm trying to be I don't know if I can be kind. I'm trying to say this in as nice a way as I can. I feel that they're more primitive in a lot of ways. They're quick, they're very emotional people. They're quicker to laugh, they're quicker to cry, quicker to get extremely angry and fly off the handle and do things. They are very talented people. You know, there's no question about that. They're good singers, and I'm just talking about positive things now. Excellent dancers, you know, they're very creative in many ways like that. But I feel that they're much more elemental people. They're much more closer to the jungle.
In 1984, the NAAWP newsletter printed a map showing how the United States could be divided into separate ethnic nations. Long Island becomes West Israel.
I think probably in a moral sense, the Jewish people, and they probably deserve to go into the ashcan of history. You know, I'm not advocating some sort of extermination. I think the best way is to resettle them, put others. And I don't think they
That tape was recorded in 1986 by Evelyn Rich on the Klan, but much of the conversation focused on the Nazi Holocaust.
But I would say maybe an hour and a half, possibly more, of the tapes that I have of Duke concern him speaking about the Holocaust and trying to explain to me how and why it clearly is nothing but, well, I believe he refers to it generally as a product of some Jewish scriptwriter in Hollywood making a lot of it up.
Here's the situation about the Holocaust. I don't know the final, you know, today I tend to believe that it didn't happen. Well, all the camps had gas chambers, you know. Zyklon B for disinfection of clothes, to kill lice so Jews wouldn't die. You know, every camp had crematoria, people that die. Every major city has crematoria. It takes Jewish Hollywood to make crematoria into, quote, ovens. Why do they call it crematoria? Why do they call it ovens? That's Hollywood. That's Hollywood.
Duke argues that shown photographs of Jewish bodies and emaciated people. Some of them are actually, I've heard him say, photos of Civil War soldiers. When I asked him, well, look, how do you account for the testimony of survivors? He said it's a certain amount of evidence.
You ever notice how many survivors they have? Do you ever notice that? Everybody, every time you turn, 50,000 survivors meeting here, 400 survivors convention here. I mean, do you ever notice? Nazis were sure inefficient, weren't they? Boy.
At Duke's insistence and by his arrangement, I traveled in February of 1986 to Los Angeles to attend an annual conference of the Institute for Historical Review. That is an organization that argues that the Holocaust, as we know it, did not take place.
The Institute was founded by Willis Carto, leader of the Liberty Lobby, the largest anti-Semitic organization in the country. A documentary team caught the camera-shy Carto at an Institute conference.
I taped interviews with other Klansmen who were there, Tom Metzger, for example, and with a young called Joe Fields. And during that interview with Mr. Fields, Duke came into the room during the taping, and he started to give some advice to Joe Fields. And the advice that he gave him was not to be so open about his neo-Nazi philosophy.
Bring new people in like a drummer. But it's the difference when if they can call you a Nazi and make it stick. I mean, tough, really hard. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the ability of people to open their minds to what you're saying. It's going to hurt your ability to communicate with them.
It doesn't take that many people to start something rolling. You know, Hitler started with, he had 7 men.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say.
And no one wanted, most people didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Don't you think it can happen right now, put the right package together? Don't you think that there are millions of Americans who are alienated and are looking for something, and the truth is the truth, and give them something to believe in?
In that excerpt, I think what strikes me most clearly is this idea, and again Duke is looking for the package. It's the word he uses. What is a package that we need to put together to attract people, to get them in? In 1985 and 1986, he used to speak a lot about possibly one way to do this might be to start a new religion. About that time, he was also going to Est seminars in California, and he would come back with renewed purpose and renewed dedication. And he felt, look, if Jim Jones can do this, if this Indian guru can do this, then surely I can do this. Surely I can get people just devoted to me.
David Duke, good to see you.
Was looking seriously at politics. Divorced from Chloe, he traveled the country, getting media attention at rallies like this thing, an integration plan.
The revolution is not just going to be in the South, the East.
David Duke has always been interested in achieving political power. In his younger years as a Klansman, elections in Louisiana. And in 1988, declared himself a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination.
I am not a supremacist. I am a white civil rights activist who's running
After
for
failing to
president
get on the
because I
ballot as a
believe
Democrat,
the American
Duke
majority
became a candidate
are now
of the
in jeopardy.
Populist Party, founded by Willis Carto of the Liberty Lobby.
I said, look, David, what makes you think that you'll be? He would never, under any circumstances, compromise his beliefs, that politics was purely and simply a vehicle to further his philosophy.
89, he finally did win. Jefferson Parish elected him to the state legislature.
You're wonderful. Thank you, Duke.
For the Republican. And the Jefferson Parish voters, after struggling through a summer of recession and record crime rates, picked him from a seven-man field.
The South shall rise again.
Thank you so much. Great.
With his victory, Duke took the stage as a mainstream and his rhetoric.
The future will mute any past criticisms. When people see me in the House of Representatives, the way I conduct myself, as I'm conducting myself right now, the criticisms of David Duke will become mute.
But shortly after he took office, David Duke, Republican, showed up once again at a meeting of the far-right Populist Party. Also there, Louisiana Republican Beth Rickey.
I really didn't know what to expect, though I thought it was important that someone go and see what he was doing up there with those people. And in the room were a bunch of people I recognized as Klansmen and active in the neo-Nazi movement nationally, and a couple of skinheads were seated to my right, party official in the back of the room, watching our latest elected white supremacist that he did it for them.
Hoping that state Republicans would censure Duke, Rickey went to his house. It was now serving as Duke's legislative office and the headquarters of his mail-order book business.
I thought if he was still peddling this literature out of his legislative office, this might indicate that he has not changed. Mein Kampf, it's not the Mein Kampf one can buy in a regular bookstore, and the introduction is sympathetic to Hitler. I also purchased Did 6 Million Really Die? The Truth at Last, which
Does what?
says the Holocaust never happened.
Elizabeth Rickey.
Rickey went public with the books.
I'm absolutely outraged. This man has the gall to put forth literature that says the Holocaust was a hoax.
I have had a book business in the past. It's handled all kinds of controversial books. All right, that's all true.
Do you intend to continue having
No, I
those
don't.
books sold out of your office?
I haven't ordered any more books. I don't plan to order any more books.
Are you going to sell any more what you have
I've got
left?
some old stock. Sure, I'm going to sell.
that?
Sure, if Doubleday Bookstore can sell it, I can sure sell it.
He seemed to treat me as if I was just, kind of in a poor thing she just doesn't understand. He wasn't angry with me, which is odd. You would think I would be really angry if someone had done something like that. He wanted to get to me and talk to me some more. And then he said, well, let's go have lunch. We got to the restaurant and this is when he brought the 6 Million Reconsidered. He propped it up, sort of like reading the back of a cereal box at a table, and is eating lunch, and pointing out passages in this book which shows, it claims the Diary of Anne Frank is a hoax, and it claims the camps were a hoax. And he has no clue that this is horrible. What he's showing me is is stunning. He's sitting there saying, well, could you pass the noodles? Look, you see, Auschwitz was merely a rubber manufacturing plant that, you know, they didn't exterminate anyone.
My opponents call me a Nazi. I despise totalitarianism. I believe in less government. They're the ones who want bigger government and less freedom, not David Duke, ladies and gentlemen.
The state Republicans refusing to follow the National Party's lead. And in 1990, he ran for the U.S. Senate as a Republican.
One of the very basic ideas of this country is that this is a land where people can make a new start, where people will be judged by their present and by their future, and not totally condemned for their past.
It's the Senate race to the incumbent, but the results were no defeat. He got 44% of the vote and 60% of the white ballots.
He has sort of this curious view of himself as this knight who's on a mission to save the white race, and that his great victory in Louisiana was, as he called it, his spiritual destiny. In fact, after one lunch we had in Baton Rouge, we were driving back to the state capitol, and he said, I want you to hear my theme song, and he popped in a cassette of Man of La Mancha and played The Impossible Dream and sang along to the Impossible Dream.
The private David Duke is more fanatical on what he's doing than the public David Duke. David has a hard time dealing on a one-to-one basis. It's easy for him to talk to a crowd of 600 people or to shake hands. He's a guy that has very few friends. His life is what he calls the crusade for white rights, and that's what he's married to.
Drew more scrutiny than ever before as he entered Louisiana's gubernatorial race. There were questions about how Duke raised much of it from out of state through phone and direct mail campaigns. And local authorities investigated whether some of the money may have gone to help support the candidate himself.
Since high school, could you please describe the jobs you've held and what experience they've given to you to run a $9 billion organization such as the state of Louisiana?
Okay, we can talk about jobs. You know, I worked in Laos during part of the Vietnam War. That was a job. I worked in small business for all my life. That's been a job. If you're suggesting to me that a small business person doesn't work, then I think you're insulting every person in this state.
There was the issue of his physical appearance, considerably changed since he entered politics.
Interview with the New Orleans Times-Picayune that you don't remember whether you had something called a chemical skin bath or a chemical skin peel. How can you forget something like that? Did you have it or did you not?
Well, that's a misquote. I haven't had plastic surgery in my face. I've had a broken nose that was repaired. That's the kind of cheap shot the little worm like you would make. Let me tell you something. You could use a little plastic surgery yourself. Maybe you'd make a much better appearance for people.
And Duke himself raised the issue of his religion.
Oh, Lord, we thank and praise you for giving us the gift of David.
I'd go to the Evangelical Bible Worship Group. That's why I worship. But I am a Christian. I profess that. I'm a born-again Christian. I'm not ashamed of that fact, and I give Christ credit for
much of his record and religion only brought more challenges.
As a newfound Christian, a born-again, are you here willing now to apologize to the people, the minorities of this state whom you have so...
30 seconds. Of course I apologize for things that I've said that have been intolerant and improper.
Do you...
Racist organization or intolerant organization that exists in the state or this country. I think we've all got to work together. Discrimination on people with these affirmative action programs and policies.
1 week before the election, his campaign coordinator, Bob Hawks, resigned and publicly questioned Duke's faith.
And I never saw any good works, good Christian works, coming from David Duke, except when he was stage center. Now that's on television, on a platform at a rally, or being interviewed by the press. Other than those times, Jesus Christ and Christianity was never mentioned.
Duke lost the election, though again, winning a majority of the white vote.
Right doesn't win every battle, but right always triumphs in the end.
Jim McPherson has been Duke's lawyer and advisor for the last 12 years. Do you know him to be a born-again?
Do I know him to be a born-again Christian? Well, you know, you're talking about me personally? I kind of look upon suspect of anybody that says they're a born-again Christian, you know. When you're being hammered, as David has been hammered, you know, I think it was kind of a normal human reaction to try to grab a hold to something that would be more acceptable, and Christianity by politicians is acceptable.
You've been close to him for 12 years. Have his views changed over that time that you've known him?
Yes, they have. They have, I would say, they've softened, they've mellowed. Where I first knew him, there was a tendency on his part to kind of make an automatic judgment based upon race, for example. And now he sees that more of the problem that the blacks are having is more of a system problem, a government-created problem, rather than something that's inherent within blacks.
But less than 2 years ago, Duke was still talking not just about the system, but about racial separation.
We don't want to accept it. We don't want to believe it. Many of us don't. But there are just differences between races, and these are natural differences. And just as much differences between the blue whale and the sperm whale, or the Rocky Mountain cougar or the African lion. I mean, there's just differences between people.
That recording of Duke was made in May of 1990 by journalist Roz Davidson.
Those comments were made in the context of a discussion we were having about crime, and David Duke was saying that he believes that blacks tend to be more violent than whites. He was advocating prison colonies in Alaska, and prison colonies he said that should be formally segregated.
Whites raping blacks in prison is unheard of. Blacks raping whites is a commonality. Blacks tend to be much more violent than whites.
I interviewed David Duke a second time. That would have been on May the 16th, 1990. This time the interview was in Capitol Building. The main part of the interview took place in the caucus rooms, the Republican caucus rooms, and he'd specifically asked me to leave my tape recorder behind. We went into the caucus rooms and he unleashed this tirade of anti-Semitism. And he said, you know, quite incredible things. For example, Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, should have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize. He said that the Jews started the Second World War to destroy Aryan culture. And he said that the Jews ran concentration camps in the Soviet Union.
Duke has resigned as president of the National Association for the Advancement of White People, but he remains a member, and the offices remain in his house. And Frontline obtained this document showing Duke still has ties to Willis Carto of the Liberty Lobby. Dated only last August, the memo from Carto to Duke confirms an exchange of mailing lists.
I asked David Duke if he had changed. His immediate response to that was, he said, the same things that drove me as a 17-year-old or a 25-year-old are the same things that drive me today. And then slightly later in the interview, he also said that, in fact, the politics nowadays tends to be a game of acting. And, you know, I think he's following his own advice in trying to portray himself as changing.
He hasn't changed in my eyes, and many of the people who work in his field know he hasn't changed. It's just that we have to realize this guy's a danger, not just to blacks, to Jews, but to everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm running for president because I believe in equal rights for every American, white or black, in this country.
So now Duke faces his next political test, the presidential primaries. Curiosity, a candidate on the fringe of the big time.
Every able-bodied welfare recipient to do work for their welfare checks.
But the question, who is David Duke, cannot be dismissed. It's a question not just about the man, but about what America sees in him.
David Duke has appealed to a great many white people, not because he's a racist, Jew hater, or anything else that you'd want to call him. People vote for him, people like him, because they hope that what he... God bless America. There are an awful lot of people out there who are dying for somebody to come along who will tell them how to cut down the welfare rolls, how to stop violent crime, how to get rid of affirmative action. They're desperate for somebody. I think it's very significant. 55% of the white voters in Louisiana voted for David Duke. And they're not all nutcases and crackpots and racists and haters. If he has got this far with the baggage that he drags along with him, just imagine where he might be now if he really didn't have that past.
It's time for America to
to reaffirm the values that we were founded upon. I'm trying to do that in this presidential race, and it's a hard fight.
David Duke likes to refer to himself as a drummer, or as he once said, as a John the Baptist paving the way for the Christ to come. He has an idea in his mind that he's a little bit before his time, and that his principal role within this movement for a disciple to
change the course of history if he has the will and the courage to stand up. I'm trying to stand up with all the strength that I have. Sometimes it's very difficult. But now you yourselves are going to have to stand up too. I know some of you right now, in fact, I believe that most of you in your hearts have believed with everything I've talked about here today. I don't know, do you agree basically with what I've said here today, ladies and gentlemen?
Frontline is provided by the financial support of viewers like you and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH Boston, which is solely responsible for its content.